Saladin. You hear that name, and what probably pops into your head is one single epic event, the recapture of Jerusalem. But the story of the man they called Salah al-Din is so much more than that. We're talking about a leader who rose up from a world in total chaos to forge an empire, a warrior who is actually respected by his enemies, and a symbol whose legacy is still being debated right now. So let's dig in and get to know the real man behind the legend.
So to really get Saladin, you first have to picture the world he was born into. The 12th century Middle East was, to put it mildly, a mess. The great Abbasid Empire, the powerhouse of the region, was fading, and that created this huge power vacuum. What you had instead was a bunch of rival factions and constant political turmoil. And that was the core challenge, a house totally divided against itself, facing a massive threat from the outside.
And the source of that threat, the one event that really defined the whole era, was the First Crusade. When European crusaders stormed Jerusalem in the year 1099, the shock that rippled through the Muslim world was, well, it was profound. These words from poets at the time, they really capture that deep sense of grief and humiliation, this feeling of bewilderment at how the city could fall, and the sheer brutality of it all.
And this contrast right here, it's absolutely key to understanding everything that happens next. On one side, you've got an Islamic world, where different groups were so busy fighting each other that they couldn't possibly come together. And on the other side, a unified Crusader kingdom, with its capital in Jerusalem, a city they had totally transformed, building Christian monuments and even sticking a giant gold cross right on top of the sacred Dome of the Rock, all after slaughtering the city's Muslim and Jewish population.
So into this chaotic, fractured world steps our guy, a man who would rise up to meet this challenge and, somehow, unite all those scattered groups. And he wasn't some Arab prince from a famous dynasty. Nope, he was a military commander of Kurdish origin. And believe me, his path to the top was anything but straightforward.
All right, so who was this man really? His full name was Salah al-Din Yusuf ibn Ayyub, born in Tikrit, which is in modern-day Iraq. And here's the thing, he wasn't from a royal Arab family. He was a Kurd, who would rise up to create the Ayyubid dynasty, a new power that would end up ruling over Egypt, Syria, and even further.
And man, his rise to power was just incredibly fast. I mean, look at this timeline. In 1169, he gets control of the vast riches of Egypt. Just 5 years later, his mentor dies, and boom, he seizes the critical city of Damascus. By 1175, the Caliph himself makes it official, naming him Sultan of both Egypt and Syria. In less than 20 years, he did what everyone thought was impossible. He united a massive territory, all the way from North Africa to Mesopotamia.
But look, this unification didn't happen just because of inspiring speeches and charisma. Saladin was a master of what you might call ruthless politics. Of course, he was a military genius, and he was incredibly patient, strategically. But he also wasn't afraid to use force and, duplicity. He engineered conspiracies, got rid of entire armies he didn't trust, and he even had rebel leaders crucified in Cairo to make a brutal and very clear point. He was a pragmatist through and through.
Okay, so with his empire now consolidated, Saladin could finally turn his attention to the one goal that had hung over the entire region, responding to the capture of Jerusalem. This was going to be the absolute pinnacle of his career, the one achievement that would write his name into the history books forever.
88 years. Just let that sink in for a second. That's how long Jerusalem had been under Crusader control. We're talking nearly 3 whole generations where the third holiest city in Islam was the capital of a Christian kingdom. This number really helps you feel the sheer weight of history and emotion behind what Saladin was about to do. This wasn't just about taking a city, it was about healing a deep, painful wound that had been open for decades.
And the turning point, the decisive blow, came at the Battle of Hattin in 1187. This is where Saladin's now unified army used this brilliant strategy to lure the Crusader forces into a death trap, cutting them off from water under the burning sun and just annihilating their army. This one battle completely shattered the military power of the Kingdom of Jerusalem and left the road to the city wide open.
And this was the moment that truly cemented his legacy. Remember what happened in 199? A horrific massacre. In 1187, Saladin had the perfect excuse for revenge, right? But he didn't take it. He chose a different path. He negotiated a peaceful surrender, and he allowed the Christian residents to just pay a ransom and leave safely. This act of mercy was in such stark contrast to what had happened 88 years before that it earned him the admiration of even his greatest enemies.
And you have to understand, Saladin was a master of symbolism and PR. He timed his formal entry into Jerusalem perfectly, October 2nd. Why that date? It was the anniversary of the Prophet Muhammad's miraculous night journey, which began in Jerusalem. He chose this date on purpose. It wasn't just a military conquest, he was framing it as a sacred, destined restoration of Islam's holy site.
But hold on, the story doesn't end there. Not by a long shot. The fall of Jerusalem sent absolute shockwaves across Europe. It triggered the Third Crusade and brought a new and very formidable challenger to the Holy Land, maybe one of the most famous kings in all of English history.
And this sets the stage for one of history's all-time greatest rivalries, Saladin versus Richard the Lionheart. So, were they just mortal enemies? Or was it something more? The truth is, it was way more complicated. Their relationship was this legendary mix of brutal, bloody fighting and this surprising, almost chivalrous, mutual respect. When you put them side by side like this, you really see this incredible dynamic. Richard actually handed Saladin a major defeat at the Battle of Arsuf. And yet, at the same time, they were constantly negotiating. And then you have these legendary stories of chivalry, like the time Saladin heard Richard was sick with a fever and sent him fresh fruit and his own personal doctor. It's just wild.
But, and this is a big but, we have to keep a balanced view here. While Saladin showed mercy in Jerusalem, Richard could be incredibly brutal. After a long siege at the city of Acre, he got tired of the negotiations over prisoners, and he ordered the execution of around 2,600 Muslim prisoners. It was a horrifying act that stood in stark contrast to Saladin's actions and absolutely shocked the Muslim world.
So in the end, it was a stalemate. Neither of these legendary leaders could land a knockout punch. Richard was worried about his throne back in England, so he negotiated a treaty with Saladin in 1192. And it was a really pragmatic compromise. Jerusalem would stay under Muslim control, but, and this was key, Christian pilgrims were guaranteed safe passage to visit. The war ended not with a bang, but with a deal. Saladin would actually die just a year after that treaty was signed. But in a lot of ways, that's when his second life, his legend, really began to take shape. And it evolved in some truly remarkable and unexpected ways in both the East and the West.
And what's so wild is who said this. That quote isn't from an Arab historian. That's from Sir Walter Scott, a 19th century Scottish novelist. It just goes to show how heroic Saladin's reputation became, even in Europe. You have Dante putting him in the Inferno with other noble pagans. You have plays written where he's the hero. The West just became fascinated with this idea of the noble, chivalrous Muslim warrior.
Now, fast forward to the 20th century, and that legend gets a whole new political spin. Arab nationalist leaders started looking back at the Crusades as a kind of metaphor for Western imperialism. And Saladin, the Kurd who united Arabs and defeated Europeans, was reborn as the ultimate symbol of resistance. Leaders like Syria's Hafez al-Assad and Iraq's Saddam Hussein literally used his image to prop themselves up, presenting themselves as the next Saladin. But here's the kicker. For all that grandeur, for all the political symbolism, the man himself was unbelievably modest. When Saladin died, his personal treasury was basically empty. He'd given away almost all of his immense wealth to his people. He owned no land, no houses, no gardens. It's a final, quiet detail that says so much about who he really was. So where does that leave us? Saladin was a ruthless political operator and a brilliant general. He was also a man of mercy, chivalry, and deep faith. His image has been used by poets, novelists, and modern dictators. So how should we remember him? As a hero? A unifier? A political pawn? Maybe the real answer is that you can't just pick one. He was all of it.